doing some great things on Old 41, and we're very excited about it. In addition to our normal incentives that we offer for financial opportunities for the developers, people ask us, well, what makes you different? Well, first off, we're investing $18.6 million in a massive infrastructure project. Part of that is going to a centralized stormwater system, completely eliminating the need to hold water on your property. We're also putting more on-street parking, which reduces the on-site parking requirement. What does that mean? That means that you can use more of your property and get a higher return on your investment. We're also designing a destination. And by doing that, what we're doing is we're using a complete streets design. We're including 2 roundabouts. We're narrowing our drive aisles, putting in parallel parking. We're also widening our sidewalks for pedestrians and bicyclists, and working on medians to provide pedestrians safe haven. That's all very important. We're also undergrounding and enhancing our utilities. And the third thing we've got is we've got anchors, including an 80-year-old roadside attraction in the Everglades Wonder Gardens that is bringing new people to downtown every day. Riverside Park, dubbed the #1 outdoor event center in Southwest Florida, bringing tens of thousands of people downtown. And then there's the agreement we're having with the county to build a brand new public library downtown. A facility that'll bring 500 to 1,000 people downtown every single day it's open. And also the city owns 5 acres of ground that we're looking to develop on the river. So we've got great things going on. This is our time in Bonita Springs. Why don't you join us? Thank you. Okay, can I introduce my team? Sure. All right. First off, I want to introduce Chris Campbell. He is with EBL Holdings, and they are the first private sector investment going in downtown because of this vision in well over 2 decades. Then we've got Jay Sweet, a planner with our community development department and lots of private sector experience on the East Coast. We have our public works director, Matt Feeney, who knows all about the intricacies of the project itself. And then we have Arlene Hunter, our development services director and assistant city manager in waiting. And she's here to talk about development incentives. So we are ready for questions.
Okay, panel.
Carol, I'm really glad to hear about the library. Moving the Fort Myers Library to the end of our downtown has just been a great thing for library patrons and for downtown generally, so I'm glad you're on top of that.
Thanks, Bill.
Is this area a CRA?
This area is not a CRA, but we have a very unique arrangement with Lee County because, as you heard from, I think, Bill earlier today, that the county kind of frowns on that. So actually we were able to negotiate a very unique revenue sharing agreement with Lee County, which is based upon a TIF formula.
So basically you don't have a CRA, but you have the same financial mechanism.
Correct.
Okay, well that's good enough.
I drove it yesterday, spent some time, thanks to Arlene, with your assistant city manager. And
yes, sir.
I mean, I'm very impressed. I think it's got huge opportunity. You've got, you're doing all the right things right now. I think the key is getting as much residential in that area as you can, and frankly, getting more restaurants down there too, so you can truly become the destination that you want. I mean, it's got all the potential. You know, I can't wait to see it in 5 years. I think it's gonna be good. You've got all the ingredients.
Great, thank you, sir. I feel like I'm on the Voice. Thank you.
Can I get Sharpie? Does everyone have this handout or just us?
Just you.
Okay. So I'm looking at a handout which has some pictures that were similar to the ones that were up on the screen. You may not need a new designer, you may just need a new renderer. What we have is a 3-laner approaching a roundabout. That would never happen. You don't need that extra lane. We have a women standing on a sidewalk with their back 1 foot from a car that's just whooshed by, and they're on about a 5-foot sidewalk with a fence holding them against the street and no parallel parking. So that's a sidewalk no one's going to want to walk on. That may just be the rendering. I'm just warning you. all those ingredients that I talked about in my talk, they all matter. And now I hope you will go back and look at your plans and check the boxes one after the other. And then finally, I want to comment, because a lot of people ask me about roundabouts. I do want to make a comment about roundabouts. I'm going to say something twice. Roundabouts are the most safe, most pedestrian-friendly automotive environment you can create. What I mean by that is that, the statistics are great. When there's an accident, you call the tow truck and not the ambulance. Statistically, they perform really well. But in the vocabulary category that I talked about, they still communicate an automotive environment. So that's why I say they're the most pedestrian-friendly automotive environment you can create. I would take an area which isn't retail, and Sarasota's got great examples of both of these in downtown Sarasota. In an area which isn't retail, I think roundabouts could be the ideal situation. In a shopping environment where you want people at cafes, you want people shopping, you want people comfortable on the sidewalk, you want parallel parking, a roundabout, I believe, is an inferior solution to a four-way stop sign and much more expensive. So I would advise you against having roundabouts right in the retail heart of your development.
Well, first up, if you are going to be blaring AC/DC, you guys can't wear suits and ties when you come out. Great presentation, great opening. Just looking at the photo that we were provided, it speaks to really, this almost looks like a slide out of Jeff's presentation. I'm referring to, not
Yes,
the rendering, but this photo here in terms of the before.
Yes, sir.
And
And the cars were speeding in the intro to your show.
Well, let me suggest about this, okay?
Just teasing.
We had a drone flight over there to get the before shot, so we could get the after. And yes, it was speeded up for the purposes of the video, just for the record.
It's going to be great to see the after on this photo. We just went through in Del Rey a 10-year process of reducing what was 6 lanes of US 1, which would be the equivalent here to perhaps maybe your 41. I'm not. You can travel US 1 from Key West to Maine.
Yes, sir.
And we spent $10 million through state DOT, mostly funded by our CRA and some city contribution, to narrow that from 6 lanes and no parking to 4 lanes and parking on both sides, the wider sidewalks, the street lights, and we did that to do all the things that Jeff was speaking to, but in a very short period of time. Of course, leading up to it and during it, it's a terrible place to be, but as people started to see what it was going to look like, we started to see immediately for sale signs and renderings in a stretch of area that has been for my entire life a bit of a no man's land, in between 2 places, renderings of a multitude of different development. So it at least highlighted for me that invest in infrastructure and the things that Jeff was talking about, and the private investment will follow very quickly.
One comment I did make to John when I was driving around with him, I think is really important, is that and it kind of is something that Jeff talked a little bit about, is about making your walk interesting. And really, to me, an interesting walk, when you don't have stuff, buildings, or active uses up against the street where there's a gap, it becomes very uninteresting. I mean, maybe not as bad as the parking structure in Grand Rapids, but I mean, you have a lot of gaps to fill in here. And I think that's your biggest issue. You should be thinking about whenever a development comes in. I mean, even I asked him about the library. You know, you're putting the library way back off the street. Would it be better to put the library closer up to the street? Was one question I asked. Maybe that train's too far down the track. But I mean, things like that, active uses on the street, are really, really important. I mean, your amphitheater is cool that you put it where you did. You can't move it now, but it's you almost lost the street edge, you know, by doing that. So the problem with the amphitheater is it's wonderful when stuff is going on a Saturday night, once a month or twice a month, but when there's nothing going on, that's a big gaping hole in your downtown that you have to think about how to handle that.
Right, and I appreciate the comments. I will tell you that our discussions with the county about placing the library back a block have been on purpose, because we're looking for a view corridor to terminate at the library building. That front lot there is also owned by the city, and we anticipate additional activity or building on that front lot to create the interest. What we're really trying to do is draw additional traffic back to that parallel street back there, Phelps Avenue, where the library would go, because we anticipate over time that there will be additional development along that corridor as well.
Okay, we have just over a minute. Brooke, I think you wanted to...
Yeah, I was just going to say, I applaud you on your infrastructure investment. I don't know whether it should be roundabouts or four-way stops. That's what these experts are for. But I applaud you on the investment. I applaud you on bringing the community assets to the area to help build upon that. Where I would caution you seriously is in your expectations on retail. I've used Bob Gibbs before. He's wonderful. He's very smart. He's clever. He's easy to work with. But retail always follows residential. Retail follows residential, which means you got to get the bodies, you got to get the people, you got to get the apartments. So I think Tim was saying this earlier, get more apartments down there, get more residential uses, cut the retail at least in half. You want your retail to be wildly successful. You don't want it to be vacant. That's one thing that Baldwin Park did wrong in Orlando. They way overbuilt the retail. You had closed storefronts. It's not a place anyone wants to walk. It's not a place anyone wants to be. If they had cut that retail down by 2/3, they would have been wildly successful.
Understood. We appreciate that. We are getting a significant amount of interest from the private sector for mixed-use developments, including retail.
Okay.
I would put just one last thought in terms of and the developers in the room certainly know this. The development community is starved for good assets. And what I mean by that, in particular, at least speaking about the southeast Florida, there is a lot of money chasing fewer and fewer good opportunities. And to the extent you're reaching out to the private sector, I wouldn't I would cast a wide as net as possible in that. Generally speaking, the development community doesn't, Southwest Florida isn't a knee-jerk second alternative for people over there. There's, we've had this conversation before going the other way, that people over here need to think about what's happening over there, best practices, but there's a lot of capital looking for opportunity that's probably just gives you a bigger opportunity to attract what's not available now over there.
Great. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you guys. You have been a wonderful panel today. And thank you to all